Hello everybody, and welcome to my channel. Today we are going to be going over a month's worth of research and a month's worth of recording and writing. And I present this work as an iceberg video about Wicca. Originally I had the idea of just going online, just finding an iceberg about Wicca or some form of the occult and just go over it. But when I was researching, I found that there was no icebergs at all for Wicca. And there was one for witchcraft, which I found really interesting, and there's a YouTuber that I briefly saw talking about it. But I wanted something with my own flair, and since there's none about Wicca or other pagan paths, I thought that I'll start the trail by doing this one. And with that being said, I should mention that I created this iceberg myself. I did ask for help online, but there wasn't a lot of help with that, so I just kind of went at it and just gave it my best shot. And I'm not a scholar of any kind. I'm not an anthropologist. I don't have a degree in religion or magic or whatever. I am simply a practitioner who wants to explain an iceberg of Wicca. And just to briefly run it down real quick, an iceberg video works like this. You got well-known things up here, the top layers, and like lesser known things in the middle, and then more obscure things at the bottom. So, you know, like they say, you only see 10% of an iceberg, and you don't see the 90% underwater. It's kind of like that. It goes from more well-known things to more obscure things. So without further ado, I present to you the Wicca Iceberg. Enjoy. Joe Gardner, considered by most to be the founder of Wicca itself, he was born in the late 19th century, and since he would get sick a lot as a kid, he would move around Europe, and that helped develop different interests throughout his life, like an interest in plants and nature and weaponry and eventually occultic things. And so it got to a point to where he moved back when he was older in England and got initiated into a coven, which after a while he had his own initiates and his own kind of thing going on, and he called his own flair Wicca. And later on, we'll talk about different elements of throughout his life, what helped him develop this. There's a lot of different elements throughout his life that influenced him, specifically in some occultic ways. But I want to discuss those later down the iceberg. I don't want to say too much right now. But all I gotta say is that he's a really interesting guy. Most of his works help influence Wicca greatly, and we'll talk about more of his things down the iceberg. And in Harm None, Do With Thee Will, this statement, it refers to the Wiccan Rede and provides a moral belief in Wicca, which essentially states that you could do whatever you want, just don't hurt yourself or others. Pretty good, I must say. Doreen Valiente was a Wiccan high priestess who was initiated by Gardner himself, and she also helped him to produce or adapt many of the early religious liturgy for Wicca. One of her most popular works being The Charge of the Goddess, which is still used today by many traditional paths and by many neo-pagans today as well. She has more writings as well, which we'll talk about later on, but she's pretty amazing, I must say, and blessed be Doreen Valiente, which I am going to pretend I did not just spend 5 to 10 minutes learning how to pronounce your name, so you're lovely. Forgive. Elements refers to the 5 elements found in Wicca, that being air, earth, fire, and water, and another 5th one being spirit or sometimes aether. They are typically called upon in casting circles, and they also have their own distinct meaning as well. Horn God and Moon Goddess are the chief main deities in the religion of Wicca. Although they are called the Horn God and Moon Goddess, they are now universally agreed upon to be essentially any male and female deity, but they are just referred to such just to be traditional. Scott Cunningham is considered to be one of the greatest Wiccan writers of all time, with his one work, Wicca, A Guide for the Solitary Practitioner, being one of the most sold copies of any Wiccan book, period. And over 800,000 copies sold, so that's a lot. His books and works have a lot of information in them. I will say they are more beginner in nature. Not to say they aren't a wonderful reference to go back to. I do like his works a lot, and Scott himself is such an interesting guy and a very influential character as well, not just with the people who read his works, but the people he met as well. There is so much about this man that I cannot fully explain in this video, but I'm hoping sometime in the unforeseen future, maybe I could talk about him in some way, in like a video format or some sort. Regardless, he's a really cool person, and as I mentioned, he was really great friends with Raymond Buckland, so that's cool. The pentacle is a widely recognized symbol used in Wicca, oftentimes being the first thing people think about when they hear the religion. It is said to be the 5 elements all when balanced together, with spirit on top and the material elements all corresponding around it. And it goes represent the element of earth itself. And people say that allegedly Gardner incorporated the pentacle after the 1909 Rider-Waite-Smith tarot deck, which I don't know if that's true fully, but it's pretty interesting nonetheless. Big Blue is a nickname given to Buckland's Book of Witchcraft for obvious reasons. Many, including myself, to consider the book to be very academic in nature. By that I mean, he will go over different chapters with you and he will teach you different things, which is pretty damn cool, but just when you feel like you finished and kind of already got the knowledge from it, he has a quiz at the end of it for you. Some of them I didn't even complete, as you can tell. But all in all, the book's very great, and it's a really great addition to anyone who was practicing, either beginning, and just good for reference too, honestly. Raymond Buckland, who I briefly touched upon in the other entry, was a very significant figure in the history and development of Wicca, and has contributed a lot to it as well. He was a high priest in the Gardnerian and Sax Wicca traditions, the latter being the one he created himself, and he has made many books on the subject of Wicca and many other things, like paranormal things, throughout his lifetime. And one of my personal favorite works of his is Wicca for Life, which I think is very lovely. He was also really good friends with Scott, who I mentioned as well earlier, and they're awesome. A craft name is a term used to describe one's religious name and is used by many Wiccans and neo-pagans. One may choose to make a craft name for themselves so that they may form an alias so no one can pursue and attack them, or they could do it as a sign of devotion or for whatever reason, really. Tools just refer to the commonly used tools in Wicca, that being the athame, wand, pentacle, and chalice. And there are also lesser known tools, or I would say ones that are lesser used, that I will mention later in the iceberg as well, but these are the most common ones I found and that I use. Blessed be is a common phrase used in religion of Wicca and is used to bid someone farewell or to greet others. The phrase was thought to have been developed between the 1960s and 70s, but it's just used to express like the gods or blessings or the natural road itself and cool things, so blessed be. The Wheel of the Year is an annual cycle of festivals that are celebrated and observed by many Wiccans and neo-pagans. It was created in the mid-20th century by British neo-pagans who combined the 4 solar events of Yule, Ashtera, Litha, and Mabon, and the cross-quarter days, those being Imbolc, Samhain, Beltan, and Lunasa. Dates and customs vary, but it's considered by many that Samhain is when the annual cycles begin, so lovely. Solitary Wicca, which I briefly mentioned before with Scott Cunningham, is a form of Wicca that is a practice that people do without a coven. This form of Wicca is very widespread as it helped many others, as I mentioned, to become more familiar with the religion, and since for a long time it was believed that only another initiate can initiate another person, it became very slow at growth. And so with the introduction of Scott Cunningham's books, along with more information being available with Wicca, it became more common practice. I also must mention that some people do encourage this. I encourage this myself because I feel like that it really, like I will get to another entry explaining this, but if people get initiated in the system, then who initiate the first person to this kind of stuff? So I kind of encourage this kind of, not belief, but this kind of practice as it helps people get more familiarized and start to really get into it and get involved with something they really want to get into. While some traditionalists, I'm not saying all, kind of say this is the incorrect way of doing this, as they strictly believe that you must be initiated or invited in order to be into the religion itself. With that, we would descend into level 2. So let's get into it. Cowan is a term used to describe non-initiates or just people who are outside of Wicca. This definition for the word came from Freemasonry, where a Cowan was considered to be someone who passed off as a Freemason without actually going through the degrees or rituals that were necessary. So they were basically calling them a poser. A Book of Shadows is a book that contains ritual instructions and religious texts in the religion of Wicca and many other neo-pagan paths. Traditionally, it is handwritten and each coven has its very own Book of Shadows. However, this hasn't stopped solitary practitioners from making use of the Book of Shadows either, with them using it in their own solitary rites and practices as well. Traditions. This refers to the different denominations of religion of Wicca, with the Gardnerian sect being the very first and earliest form of Wicca. From my understanding, there seems to be 2 main types of traditions in Wicca, those being Gardnerian in nature, those being non-Gardnerian. With Gardnerian being the one stemming from Gardnerian, which we'll talk about later in the iceberg, and the other one just being their own willy-nilly thing. Now, there are many kinds of traditions, but just to label a few, there's Blue Star Wicca, Dianic Wicca, Corellian tradition, and Sax Wicca, and Alexandrian Wicca. So there's all kinds, and they're all interesting in their own right. Esbats are lunar festivals celebrated in Wicca, and they are celebrated and held every full moon. The word Esbat was coined by Marguerite Murray, and it comes from the Old French word "sisprat," which means to frolic and amuse oneself. Marguerite Murray was a 20th century archaeologist and folklorist who was best well known for her witch cult hypothesis, which we'll talk about later in the Iceberg. With her studies and research, Gerald Garner was able to pioneer Wicca as we know it today. Marguerite Murray was also a first-wave feminist as well. She's made many contributions to the field of Egyptology. I keep getting the words mixed up. Egyptology. She's often known as the Old Lady of Egyptology. The New Forest Coven were a alleged group of witches who met in the New Forest area of South England. According to Gerald Garner himself, he used the coven's beliefs, practices, and rituals as a basis for his tradition of Wicca. Gerald Garner also believed that this coven was a fragment of the once widespread witch cult, and is said that this group has prevented Nazis from crossing the English Channel in World War II. Despite the claims by Gerald Garner himself, there's some controversy regarding the existence of this coven, of it being there at all, but we'll get to that later. Just don't worry. A Witch's Bible is a book made by Janet and Stuart Farrar, and it is actually two of their books compiled into one, those books being The 8 Steps for Witches and A Witch's Way. The book itself actually encompasses a lot of elements of witchcraft, from its beliefs to its practices, and as you can tell, it's about as damn thick as the Bible itself, too. Stuart Farrar said himself that this book contains elements from the Alexandrian Book of Shadows, which is pretty interesting, I must say. Hand fasting is a symbolic act that binds two people together during a wedding ceremony to show their commitment towards each other. The practice itself actually predates Wicca, but has been incorporated into the religion since the late 1960s. Cakes and ale is a ceremonial meal that happens at the end of a ritual. This meal can be given as an offering to higher powers or be used to recenter oneself after rising energy. The bread can be of any baked good, and the drink can be of any liquid, essentially. So if you can't use cakes and ale or wine of some sort, you can always substitute with juice or water. The practice itself has actually originated in Gardnerian rituals, and it's been adapted and been used in many ways over the years. Oh, I said that right. Eclectic Wicca is a term used to describe those who don't use any strict traditional guidelines in their craft. Eclectic Wiccans often incorporate or mix in different traditions and practices into their own craft so that they could better suit their lifestyles and beliefs. Raven Gramassi was an American author who made various books on Wicca, witchcraft, and neo-paganism. His various works include Hereditary Witchcraft, Italian Witchcraft, Wicked Magic, and Grimoire of the Thorn-Blooded Witch, with the last one being my favorite, actually. It should also be noted that Raven Gramassi actually trained an aspiring Scott Cunningham in the early 1980s, and this is, to me, that's really interesting because these are my two favorite authors, and at some point in time they met and actually just talked to each other, and they were learning off each other a lot, so that was really cool to learn. Okay, so this is going to be a long one, but UPGs, or Unverified Personal Gnosis, is a spiritual belief gained through personal experiences or intuitively through dreams or divination and such. It's a kind of spiritual knowledge that isn't formally recognized by any organizations or spiritual texts within a religion, but it is true to you. I add this to the iceberg as many neo-pagans and Wiccans experience this as a way to recover what has been lost from the older religions that were so rich in culture and history and practices and beliefs, and we use this kind of knowledge or personal experiences with the divine to help us give flesh to our bone of beliefs in the modern world. It's very personal and it gives me chills to my spine every time I talk about it, but I feel like whenever we want an answer from the old ones of some kind of thing of any nature, it can be given directly towards us sometimes. Rites of passage refers to various rituals of the life of a Wiccan. Those may include a Wickening, which we'll talk about later in the iceberg, a coming of age ceremony, which is when they become a young male or female, and then a saging or a croning, which is when they advance in age and become a crone or a sage. Only a witch can initiate a witch essentially means that magical people can only make you a magical person. Some traditionalists have pushed this to express their belief that this is the only way one can truly become a Wiccan or a witch, whilst others find this factually wrong, as if a witch can only initiate a witch, then if you go back enough, who initiated the first witch? I can understand the traditionalist point of view, as they have a concept where lineages and transferring the energy from teacher to student makes the power stronger each generation, but I personally believe that anyone has this kind of power within, and we all become witches or Wiccans It's just how we unleash that energy and use it for our lives for the better. Silver Ravenwolf is another American author who made various books on the topics of witchcraft, New Age magic, and Wicca. Some of her works include Teen Witch or Solitary Witchcraft, and I have one myself. It's about like puppet magic, so that's interesting actually. And I found this kind of odd too, but the coven she was initiated in, which was the Serpentstone family tradition, was the same coven that Scott Cunningham was initiated into as well. Guys, this guy's just fucking everywhere. I just have to make a video about this guy. I'm just telling you. I mean, he has like fucking 2 autobiographies made about him. I mean, what? Alex Sanders, which now that I'm saying out loud is upon his middle name Alexander Lowe, was an English occultist and high priest of Wicca. He and his wife Maxine Sanders were also the founders of the Alexandrian tradition of Wicca, and while researching this guy, he's pretty interesting. And when I mean interesting, I mean that he not only claimed to be the king of witches, but he also used black magic at one point in his life to get what he wanted, like money and like naughty kissing stuff. And he did get what he wanted, and I quote, he found he was adopted by a wealthy elderly couple who said that he was a carbon copy of the deceased son. So they fed, clothed, and eventually gave this dude a whole fucking house with an allowance to rent on, just because he wanted it. Although later on, he eventually regretted it deeply, as he found that his dabbling into black magic was the result of his sister's ill health and fortune. So he decided, instead of using his magic on himself and his own personal and selfish desires, to help and use it to teach others of the practice. Oh, and he and another guy wanked off together and produced a magic baby. And in case you're wondering, the baby's name was Michael. So, yeah. Oh my god. I can't with this guy. Hello everyone, and in case you're wondering why I look different, this is actually me from the future, and I'm here to tell you that I made an oopsie. So I found when I was editing the video that I accidentally did not record any of the segments for the entry of for Janet and Stuart Farrar, and I quickly wanted to shoot a video real quick of it. That's why I look a little weird like this, because I just came home from work and I look a little wild. So I'm going to quickly go over that so we can continue with the rest of the video. Both were initiated into the Alexandrian tradition of Wicca, with Stuart Farrar being initiated first by Alexander's wife Maxine, and later on Janet Farrar being initiated herself into the tradition. Later on in life, though, they decided to branch off and form their own covens, and it is said that up to 75% of Wiccans in the Northern Republic and the Republic of Ireland can trace their roots back to the Farrars themselves, which is really cool. Another thing that I found interesting was that Stuart Farrar actually maintained constant contact with Alexander's up until his death, and later on, Stuart Farrar passed away on February 7th in 2000. He is survived by Janet Farrar, and she lives now with her new husband, Galvin Bone. Now, onto the video. Selena Fox is a Wiccan priestess who fought for the religious rights of other pagans, Wiccans, and other nature-based religions, both nationally and internationally. She spearheaded the inclusion of the pentacle to be on government-issued markers, such as dog tags and headstones and the such, and she's also founded the Circle Sanctuary, which is one of the oldest pagan centers and Wiccan churches in America. In 1995, she also created the Circle Cemetery to serve as the final resting place for various practitioners of the pagan beliefs and practices. So, blessed be Selena, blessed be. The Witch's Voice was the largest neo-pagan website that had a goal of connecting and providing information for the pagan community. Created in 1997 by Ren Walker and Fritz Young, this website was considered to be the most extensive pagan website at the time, and even won People's Choice under Spirituality in the 2002 Webby Awards. Sadly though, in late 2019, the website was officially shut down, yet it is still archived from the Wayback Machine, truly marking the end of an era on the web. And with that, we finished the first 2 tiers of the Wicca Iceberg. Now, I know I want to finish the other topics another date because I wanted this first video, since it took too long, to be out by Halloween. So the second video should be coming shortly after that. And since there's going to be 8 tiers in this iceberg, I'm going to make 4 videos. So this being part 1, and then there'll be part 2 and 3, and lastly part 4. As for now, I suggest that you stay up to date if you want to hear more about this content or any more of my videos. And I appreciate you watching this, and I hope you have a good one.